It's another DJ Shan Azure Remix show. I am joined once more by Matt Canty. How's it going, Matt?
Hey Shannon, good. How about yourself?
Good, good. Looks like you're standing. Do you want to tell the audience what you got recently?
I am. Yes. So my wife bought me a standing desk for our anniversary because
Oh,
I have some back problems or hip problems that are caused by sitting too long, and so
yeah.
she got me this so that I can, continue being a little more healthy, I guess.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Hashtag we're over 40. That's what we should also add to the mix here, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as you get older, your body doesn't necessarily like you as much. You don't feel like you're older, but your body reminds you that you're older, right?
Only when I roll out of bed in the morning.
Exactly. So if you've been following the shows thus far, we've taken you through what ARM templates are, what infrastructure as code is. We've walked you through standing up a very bare bones template. We've added things in. We have gone through the rigorous motions of the nested deployment, but we were able to get that up and functional. We've also gone through how to plug in a key vault, which is super important because you don't want to store your secrets in code. Today, we are going to talk about something called desired state configuration, and we'll introduce a concept called extensions. So, Matt, do you want to start describing what desired state configuration is, or maybe DSC? Folks may have heard that.
Yeah. So those of you who are familiar with Windows and Windows administration might know what DSC is. Those of you who are more familiar with Linux administration may be more familiar with things like Chef or Puppet or Ansible or something of that nature. What desired state configuration is really kind of a plugin for PowerShell that allows you to write a configuration within a PowerShell file declaratively, right? So we're talking about infrastructure as code, and we talk about this declarative syntax of using, say, JSON in order to describe something that is then going to be, enacted for us by what would be called the template execution engine. In this case, the configuration then is that declaration, just like we're declaring JSON in our ARM templates, it is the declaration in PowerShell, and then PowerShell will, on that machine that you deploy to, will go ahead and enact that configuration. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the background, like a manifest file is created, and it's kind of this weird language. I forget what it's called, but it was a configuration language, and it used to be used with a lot of like Windows support tools, right? So, you would contact support and they would say, okay, we'll run this support tool, and it would generate this file, which is a weird file type. And that manifest file for DSC is kind of that same language of file.
Very cool.
So, yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Very cool. And I feel like you have taught me so much about desired state configuration. I am certainly not the guru. In fact, when I get stuck, I often go to you. What did I forget? Right? Because it's something that it's invaluable when it works, but you may not use it every single day. I think that's the hard part, right? And so you might take down a lot of notes. You might remember certain components of it, but it's one of those things where it's hard to remember exactly how you set up the desired state configuration extension. Now, the extension itself, think of it like an extra little component of configuration for your VM, right? So you've got security extensions, monitoring extensions. You also have desired state configuration extensions. There's Chef extensions. I think there's even an Ansible extension, right? So these are ways in which that Azure can go in to the guest OS and configure the guest OS on behalf of whatever parameters you pass or whatever configurations that need to happen. So the VM gets deployed, and then after it's deployed, the extension sort of goes in and says, I know exactly what I need to do. I'm going to go in and configure exactly what Matt asked. And then the end state is everything's up and functional, and it's kind of where you want it to be versus spinning up a VM and then RDPing into the VM and adding whatever configuration bits you need to.
Yeah, and something to be said about that, for those of you who are rolling your own images and things like that, you might be aware of this Azure Agent for virtual machines that you need to put on your image, whether it's Windows or Linux. There's this agent, and that agent is what kind of enables the communication between that virtual machine and the fabric. And that's what's actually used to install these extensions when you go and tell the portal, hey, install this extension, whether that's through ARM, whether that's just clicking in the portal or through the API or however you do it. But yes, that's the communication mechanism. That is kind of the sausage in the background that allows this to be made.
Yeah. And I think it's worthy of bringing up, there's kind of two layers of infrastructure. There's everything that happens at the Azure Service Fabric layer, and there's everything that happens in the guest OS. So for instance, you would never want to go into a Windows VM and configure the NIC inside the VM. You'd want to configure it in the Azure VM on that side of things in the portal, because you'll lose access to the VM, right? So that agent really is helpful in terms of Azure being able to configure it on behalf of Azure, really.
Right. Because if you were to go in and configure the NIC on a VM, for example, Azure has no idea that you just set an IP address on that VM, and so it might go and dole that same IP address out to another VM, and then you've run into IP address conflict, right? And also in the background, if something happens, in the data center, right, and your VM needs to be healed to another machine, that binding for the NIC is actually done to a piece of hardware, right? So when you configure that and you set up your NIC, if that NIC, if that machine is healed onto another piece of hardware, that changes the NIC anyways, and that binding is lost. So that configuration will not come over in the process of a healing situation.
Yeah. And I think for me, it was always an interesting way of learning things, right? So somebody told me if you configure it and you edit the NIC inside the VM, you'll lose access. Well, let's just try it out. Yeah, I lost it. So it's one of those things where you can always experiment, and experiment is something I think that's really, we've hit home on throughout these sessions, because we even ran into some weirdness trying to get everything up and functional. So it's just one of those things where experiment, know that there's so many different layers of Azure and layers of what you have to configure. And I feel like what you'll wind up doing is you'll wind up becoming a lot more knowledgeable on how to sort of set up certain things. So I think that sort of sets the stage. Wouldn't you say, Matt? Is there anything else you want to add about what DSC does or extensions?
So a little bit more about DSC is that it's kind of like a provider-driven thing, right? Because you have software out there like, say, SharePoint, for instance,
right?
Which might have DSC associated with it. Yeah, this is the technology we don't mention, but it might have DSC associated with it. But there may be software out there that doesn't have DSC configuration capability because the developer did not go in and kind of build that. So what it takes to get that functionality is basically a set of modules, PowerShell modules. They can be written in PowerShell, they can be written in C#, whatever, languages like that. And that allows that functionality of being able to declaratively configure that. So you might go out and look, and there is a gallery of desired state config, like a library of different modules, right? And you might go out and you might find some of these modules for different things. These could be community written modules. They could be written by the manufacturer of said software that you're trying to configure. But just note as well that if you see one of those and it starts with an X, those are generally experimental and might not be fully supported for something that you would want to do in production. So just keep that in mind as you're out there exploring DSC more, if that's what you're choosing to do.
I think what we can do in terms of the show notes is we can link to some of those areas where you can get a better understanding of how to build out things. The community does a great job of putting a lot of this on GitHub, as well as a lot of examples. So you know kind of how to build out that file. You don't have to know how to just build out a DSC file. You've got sort of a guide that helps you, just like the ARM template reference. And I feel like our documentation is great at Microsoft, but I think some of the community stuff really hits it home even farther, because some of the examples aren't just kind of that 101, 201 tutorial. It kind of takes you to that full level of this will be a fully configured VM once we run everything through.
Right. And so One of the things that I have talked to customers about when it comes down to, hey, I'm trying to get this VM to deploy and be already configured, right? There's a couple ways that you could do that. Desired state configuration is one of those ways. Another way that you could do that is building stuff into your image, right? You can bake up your image. You can configure it to run a script or do whatever you want to kind of kick off after you provision that machine in Azure. And I'm going to tell you that the trade-off between using something like desired state configuration, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, whatever, versus building those things into the VM image, the trade-off is where you spend your time um, getting that VM spun up, right? You can spend some time, invest your time into maintaining that image, getting everything set up, and every time you come up with a new image, then you're taking time to bake those things in and get those things working, and testing your image and doing all that stuff. But then when you provision that image, it provisions a lot more quickly in most cases, right? When it comes to something like desired state config, right, you're going to provision that VM, and then you're going to provision the extension, and then that extension is going to run some scripts and things like that. So you absorb your cost in time on the provisioning side of setting up that VM, right? So if you're trying to do this for something like a scaling operation, for example, right, and you want to use auto scale or something like that, where you say, oh yeah, I need to, if my CPU percentages reaches 70%, I want to start scaling out, right? Then that auto scale is going to kick off a new VM and a scale set or whatever, and it's going to start provisioning that. Well, the more scripting and software that it has to download and things like that, the longer it's going to take to provision that machine when you might need it for scale, right? So
Sure.
there's some trade-offs there. And then of course there are things like SharePoint, which you can't do that for, because when you scale back or scale up, there are things that get added into the database that are not going to happen. Like if you deprovision a machine, for example, to scale down with SharePoint, it's going to take it out. That machine's still going to be registered in the SharePoint database, and you're going to end up running into a lot of problems when you go to upgrade language packs or service packs or whatever. So just be aware of that too. You really have to know the workload that you're provisioning, and how that is going to be affected by whether you choose to do this in the image via desired state configuration, or not to choose it at all and have a manual scale out process.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very, very cool. So Matt, let's go back to the template that we've been working on. So I'm going to flip to this layout. And
Yeah.
do you want to walk through how this gets built, and then maybe we can even show it being built?
So this is the template that we have been working on. Remember, we started with a linked template now, right? We have our VM template down here, and then in our Azure Deploy.json, we are just, that's the parameter, sorry. We are just calling that linked template with a deployment resource type, right? And that's going to go, we're saying deploy, we're going to deploy this from this URL, right? And remember, we're uploading these things into the storage account via the PowerShell that we're using to do this deployment. So all of that stuff is going to get uploaded. You're going to generate a SAS token, and then the template execution engine is going to be able to reach that template location, and then it's going to run that template, which is VM template, as a deployment. And so then it's going to go deploy our NIC and all the things that are part of our VM template, right? And we have a skeleton of the VNet template, but we have not implemented that part of doing this whole deployment. And in this case, what we're going to do then is we're going to add another file in here to do the DSC deployment, right? So now we're separating kind of our template to make it easier to manage. So now, when I go and say, oh, I need to modify the desired state configuration of this deployment for the next version of the deployment, then we can just go and modify that, within that template, instead of having to
Sure.
go through a monolith to figure out where everything is.
I like that.
And then of course we have our parameters file in here as well, and then our deployment PowerShell file. So what we need to do is actually the first thing we need to do is we are going to build out our desired state configuration file, right? So that desired state configuration file is going to be a PowerShell file. It's going to be a PS1. And there's a couple of nuances in the way that this extension works. So first of all, it's going to be in the form, it's going to be in a zip folder, right? So it's expected to be that your configuration is stored inside your PowerShell file inside of a zip file, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it DSC.
And you also have to put the modules in too. The modules that we talked about need to go in there as well.
If you're using them, I don't think this one. So there are some modules in Windows by default.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And I think, yeah, in the web server one that we're going to use is in there by default.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So to set the stage, we chose a desired state configuration example that you'd probably even see in our documentation. Something that's pretty straightforward just to understand the concept, especially if you're brand new.
So I'm just going to create this PowerShell file called webserver.ps1. And what this is going to have is a declarative configuration, which starts out with configuration. You can see that Visual Studio Code recognizes that configuration keyword.
Yeah, IntelliSense saves me quite a bit. I often feel like without IntelliSense, I don't know how savvy I'd be with infrastructure as code, right?
Exactly. And we're going to name this configuration just because in a configuration file, you can actually have multiple configurations, right? So if I wanted to do another configuration, I could do app server, for instance, if I was going to make a multi-tier application, right? And then I could say this machine goes and gets this configuration, this machine goes and gets this type of configuration, right? So we're gonna name our configuration, and then what we're going to do is we're going to specify which node that we are targeting. Now, the way that desired state configuration works is there's actually two modes that you can use. And when you do this outside of Azure, there's some infrastructure that's set up. You'll have possibly a repository where you keep these, and you can point your desired state configuration client to say, pull your configuration from this location every X often. And that could be either a SMB location, or it could be actually a web server. In this case, what the extension does is it actually takes this configuration, builds it all on the local machine, and then pushes it to itself. So we're going to say our node is going to be localhost. That's the one we're configuring. And then this is the configuration that our local host is going to have. Now, you got to know a couple things about and what we're trying to do here, right? So you have to know a couple of things about the features and stuff. So we're going to install a feature, and it's going to be basically Iis. So it's going to be the web server feature. And there's actually a cool way, and I think Windows 10 has it here. So if you do git dash, this is PowerShell, git dash Windows feature. Not. So I lied. It's not in on Windows 10. I thought it was, but that's okay. You can run this from your server, and that server will tell you what features are available to install. And I just know off the top of my head from doing this so much that we are going to install first of all, Windows feature here, and that feature we're going to call web server because basically that's what it is. And then inside of this, we are going to say ensure. And what are we going to? I think it's an equal sign here. Ensure that it's present, right? So you could say, if we were trying to harden our servers, we could go through this like configuration and say, ensure that Iis is not on there because that's a vulnerability, right? That's an attack surface, right? So you can go in and say, ensure that a feature is present or absent, and that will desired state configuration will make that happen.
And I think the thing I want to call out real quick here is it's not crazy PowerShell commandlet-y, right? Like it's literally like ensure this is here.
Property value. It's basically property and value. Yep.
And I think for me, when I first heard about desired state configuration, I thought, oh, great, I'm going to have to learn a bunch of new commandlets. I'm going to have to learn a bunch of new ways to get that info. It's more like a recipe than it is a bunch of commandlets, right?
Right, which is why Chef is called Chef, because they call their configurations recipes, right?
Yeah, and I think Puppet is a very similar analogy, the sense that you're the puppeteer, you're having your puppet go do what you ask it to do. Same thing. It's declarative code.
Exactly. That's makes it so much easier. You don't have to learn a bunch of like how do I
But I love that I went there. I love that I was like, great, I got to go learn a bunch of new commandlets. Like, oh.
Yep. So, and I happen to know that the name of the feature that we want is web-server. Once we get on this.
I was going to say one thing too. If it's a different feature, there's documentation that you could follow, and we'll link to some of that in the show notes so that you know exactly what you're asking for. Because maybe it's not web server. Maybe you want to make sure that you've got DHCP on there or something like that, right?
Windows
Firewall, it doesn't have to be just Azure. You can use this on-prem too.
Right. You can mess with the Windows firewall. You can do other things. If I wanted to get really crazy and I had a website cooked up, I could do something like this. You could do like a file, and then make sure that you get a file. You specify the source and the destination of that file, and it will actually put that file there. So if I had my website all, coded up, and I had these files that I wanted to put on the web server and say this is where you serve the site from, I could easily do that here. Right.
Which is crazy, right? So
Right. Right.
I think me thinking it was this whole elaborate language that I was going to have to figure out how to use. It's not, right? And there's a bunch of helpful documentation, and I think it's really the most helpful when it comes to making sure that the VMs, when they get spun up in Azure, are where you want them to be, fully configured, ready to go. You don't have to log in and manually configure anything, right?
Right. And this is a simple example just to show you how you're going to kind of manage the extension and things like that. We're by no means going deep into a desired state configuration, just giving you a little taste. And then of course, visit the show notes and find that documentation. And if you really want to dive deep, and I actually found what was the old web-based training that we had, like Virtual Academy or something like that.
Yes. Did you find that? Because I remember you told me I should go and I should walk through it, and then they pulled Virtual Academy.
Right.
Did you find it?
I have not yet,
Oh, okay.
but there were some really, really good videos on desired state configuration, like desired state configuration, advanced desired state configuration, that kind of walked through all of this stuff that you could do and how to do it. And this was more of it wasn't necessarily to do with Azure, but more so like this is what you can do with your own infrastructure. You set up your poll server, you set up all this stuff, but and then you write your configurations and then you push them or put them up there in the poll server. And then you could also configure. You could also configure it's called the local configuration manager for desired state config, and you can configure that with different settings, and you could do that even in this configuration file, right? And then I could push this configuration file. The local config manager would configure itself to do whatever I told it to do, and then would also configure this. One of the things you can tell it to do is say, hey, go pull your configuration from this place, and then you can say, also pull it every 30 minutes, right? So it'll go out, look for a new configuration file. So it'll see a configuration file out there, look at it, it'll check the checksum to see if it's changed.
Very cool.
If it has, then it will download that file and reconfigure itself. And that'll happen every half hour.
Yeah, so if you don't have anything on-prem and you've got a lot of Windows servers, this is something to take a look at. It's one of those things where I used it mostly when I moved into Azure, but configuration management is king, I think, or queen, whatever the right way you want to think about it is, right?
Royalty.
Royalty. Configuration management is royalty because you don't want to have to do manual configurations after a server comes up. Doesn't matter if it's on-prem, doesn't matter if it's in Azure or any cloud for that matter. It's just the more you want to automate, or the more you can automate, the faster your deployments become, and the more you're able to then focus on new ways of innovation within your company, right?
Exactly. And that's what we want you doing, using your brain, not having to just repeat the same thing over and over and over and over.
Right.
That's why we teach you this stuff. And I just noticed, if you saw the screen, I took off, I accidentally put a colon after.
Oh, I was wondering why it was squiggly. And then I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Okay.
There didn't need to be a colon there. And I'm going to go ahead and put quotes around localhost 2 around the name.
Okay.
And that's like if you had spaces or something like that in the name. Anyway, so, and you could do, so I'll let you go watch the advanced desired state config videos. I'll see if I can find them. If I can find them, I'll send them to Shannon. She can put them in the show notes, because they're really good. Because there are things that you can do, like instead of necessarily just pushing a configuration file, you can actually have just tell this server, hey, you are a web server or you are an application server, and it will go out and say, oh, these are all the application servers. These need to have this configuration. These are all the web servers. You need to have this configuration, right? So there's a lot of configuration data that you can include to the to desired state config to have desired state config actually create the right file to pass to the right server based on what role that server has.
Very cool.
So we're going to go ahead and save this. And one thing I do want to do is I'm going to go ahead. I think that's all we need. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up File Explorer because I want to go in there for the sake of this thing. I need to put it in a zip file, remember.
Oh yeah, good call. Because we would have gone through that, would have been like, what do we forget? We did everything right. What's going on? But see, again, like, because you spend so much time doing all of this stuff, sometimes the easy stuff you might forget. And that's completely fine because we do that ourselves.
Exactly. So I'm going to compress this to a zip file and boom, that's going to show up. There we go. It's showing up over here. So it's webserver.zip. Okay. So we've got that done. So now what we want to do, now that we're done with this, we're going to add another file in here. And we're going to call it, let's call it DSC extension.json. Okay. And what we're going to do with this one is we're going to do arm bang because Visual Studio Code will generate all this boilerplate garbage for us, right?
Okay.
And first thing I like to do, you can think about parameters and variables if you want, but the way I like to do it is kind of reverse engineering or say, what makes sense. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put the resource in here. Once we're writing the resource, then we'll figure out what we need to variabilize or parameterize in order to get this template to run correctly.
Okay.
So this is going to be of type. It is Microsoft.compute/virtual machine/extensions.
Okay.
Okay, and then our name. So I know something here that probably a lot of you are going to run into. So I'm going to break this on purpose, and you'll see later where it's broken. And I'll show you how to fix it. But I'll show you also, really the important thing is the error that it emits so you know exactly what you have to fix, right? So we're going to call this, let's just call this configuration, right? Or DSC, let's call it DSC extension just. That'll make it a little bit easier. Okay, so aside from the name, we need that's what I wanted, API version. And the API version, we're just going to go, I think 2018-601 is probably the last familiarity that I have with it. I don't know if any properties have changed since it, so we're going to do that. We also need a location, and that is going to be...
Weren't we all in East US?
Were we? Doesn't matter, because this is one of the things that we should...
Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Pass it in. So we want to create all our stuff.
No, that's right. I forgot that we did. It's got the red squiggly though.
Yeah, because we don't have a location parameter. So
here,
and we do our new parameter location, and it is a string, and it is that. Okay, so now we got our location. See, this is why I like the reverse order of not doing it from the top down.
Yeah.
Okay, location, and then we want some properties that we're going to have to define here. And so the properties that we need are, because we're configuring an extension, this could be any number of extensions that that are available within Azure. So we first of all need the type of extension, right?
Okay.
And type is going to be DSC, I believe. We could do this. We could back this off and see what it comes up with. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Cool.
And then we're going to need a publisher, who's the publisher of said extension, and that's going to be Microsoft. No, it's not Azure Extensions as you would think it is, because we're doing DSC. We want this PowerShell one.
Got it.
And then let's see, we have a type handler version, which is basically saying, kind of version of the extension that we're using. And I think let's try 277. I think is the last I can recall. And you can find this information within the documentation as well, right? The references that I've showed in the past. Yeah. And then we're going to say, and I think this auto upgrade minor version, I think this extension does not support auto upgrade. We can see that in the portal when we go to configure that extension. And then what else do we need? We need some settings, because we got to tell this extension, hey, this is where you're going to get your configuration from that you're going to. So we need settings. So there's two types of settings. There's settings and there are protected settings. The difference is anything that's put in protected settings is going to be encrypted when it's passed along. So if you don't want passwords to be just sent along in plain text, you want to put those in protected settings. Now, we're not going to have any passwords or anything involved with this thing, because we're just passing this file. We don't need to pass any parameters to the file or anything like that.
Right.
So in our settings, we need something to do with modules. Yep. Oops, wrong one. Module URL. That's what I saw in there. Give me my IntelliSense back. yeah, module URL. And that is going to be the location of where the file is that contains our PS1, right? So a good idea for this, because we're probably going to have to like set up some stuff, because remember, we're not going to be able to, our DSC is going to be uploaded into that storage account. So we're going to need things like the artifacts location SAS token, all that stuff, right? So let's go ahead and just set this up as a variable so that we can put that little formula together. Yeah, let's just say modules URL. And let's go ahead and set up a new variable then. And this value here is going to be a concatenation of, so first of all, our artifacts location, which we don't have, which means we're going to have to come up here and set up another parameter. Okay. And I'm just going to make it an easy description for now. Artifacts location. Okay. And then what else are we concatenating into that? We're concatenating the folder and file structure of where we're keeping this. So we notice here the DSC folder, and then we have our web server.zip. So we want, I think artifacts location, I think ends in a slash already. So we'll try it this way. If it fails, then we'll know what happened. So we'll just try DSC slash whatever we called this web server.zip, right?
Yep.
And another thing to keep in mind here, we're operating out of an Azure storage account. So case matters. So if I were to put lowercase DSC, it's going to come back and give me the middle finger because that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we want, the last thing we want, don't forget, is we want our artifacts location SAS token, right? Because we got to pass it the security that it needs to get to the artifacts location and authenticate properly, which is that token that's going to be generated. All right, so that's where our module is going to come from. I think that's all good and set up for that. Another thing that we need in our settings, though, is we're telling it, here's the file that you need to use. What we're not telling it is, this is the configuration out of that file that you need to use, right? So our configuration function, which is going to be another thing that we should probably put together in a variable. So in our variable, and I'll show you how to put this together. So here's another caveat thing that you're going to run into. Is you're going to run into this configuration function, and you're going to say, oh yeah, what did I call it? I called it web server, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's the zip file. I called it web server. What the documentation should tell you, but what you probably don't know off the top is that you need to specify it in the form of file/function. So otherwise, it's not going to know which file inside that zip file that we just pointed it to, because that could contain multiple zip files, right? So we're going to say for our configuration function, we're going to say it's in, was in the right spot. It's in web server.ps1, which is the ps1 file inside that zip file, and then backslash, and of course I just escaped characters, so I have to put another backslash in there, and then the name of our function, which is web server, or the name of our configuration, which is web server. Okay, so that is the configuration function that we're going to want to pass in, and then of course I think we're complaining here because we don't actually specify protected settings, and it's required, even though we don't have any protected settings. We're going to go ahead and just specify this as a blank. So that is our DSC extension.
Very cool.
Yep. Now, so we need to now tell our Azure Deploy.json to say, hey, go deploy this bad boy, right? When we do our link template deployment. So let's go into Azure Deploy.json, and we have our VM deployment here. And let's go ahead and create another deployment. So yep, type is going to be, see if they'll give us some IntelliSense. It is Microsoft. Do you remember Microsoft dot? I was hoping for the IntelliSense. Oh, you know what? I have one above. Let's look at that.
I was gonna say, yeah, I actually don't remember, but I go pull it up.
Microsoft.resources/deployments.
There you go. Okay. I mean, this is where we give a little bit of homage to Larry Tesler for his copy paste functionality, and then the IntelliSense. Without that, I don't know if I could do coding the way I have been doing ever since I moved 100% to cloud. You know.
Right. What's wrong with my type? Oh, I got a mismatch in my. And it doesn't look like it likes that very much either, does it? Let's just do double quotes here. Now what isn't it like?
You just want to copy it from up above? Was that'd be easier?
I mean, it says the same thing. It just doesn't like something in my syntax.
Oh, well, looks like it stopped. Maybe it just took a little bit of time.
Okay, yeah, now it just doesn't like the comma, I think.
Which is normal. Okay.
All right, so name, first of all. What's our deployment name going to be called? It is going to be called, let's just call it, so we're deploying a configuration that's going to turn this into a web server. So let's just say web serverize.
I like that. That works.
And okay, API version, again, you know, get some IntelliSense here. 20, what did I choose? 2018-601. I think this is the closest to that. And then here again, we need our one thing that we do need. So the way the template execution engine works, and I don't know if you all recall talking about this, but all of these things it's going to try to deploy in parallel unless I tell it, hey, you can't deploy these things until these things are done, right? We can't deploy a VM extension to a VM that's not there yet, so we need to put a depends on in here, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And in the case of linked templates, if you're running another template, we're just going to call this depends on, and it's going to pull it up for me, another deployment that's already there. So wait until VM deployment is done and then deploy this bad boy. So we got our depends on, and now we want to do our properties. And our properties include, hey, what mode are we going to use? Yep, and we're going to go ahead and do incremental. And then we've got what's the template that we're going to deploy, and that, oh, we're not providing the template, we need the template link. So template is if you're going to define a whole template underneath this little section here. So you would actually define all your JSON under there. But our point in doing this is to try to get rid of that monolithic, you know, look. So we're just going to do a template link. And that template link is actually an object that includes like a URI. So here's where we might need to variabilize something, right? Let's call it, what do we want to call it? We want to call it DSC template link.
Okay.
All right, let's go up here and create that. So DSC template link, I think that's how I did it. And then that is going to be, here we're going to paste together all of our stuff like our artifacts location. This one already has that stuff defined, right? Artifacts location. And then we want now our, what is our name of our DSC extension, .json. And again, make sure you get that spelled correctly, first of all, and caps correctly as well. .json. And then, of course, our parameters, artifacts, hit tab too quickly. Okay, artifacts location SAS token. Okay, so that's where we're going to get our link from. And then another thing that we need to come in here is, you know, we will specify content version since we have a content version on there. I'm just going to say 1.0.0. Oh. All right, template link. And then, of course, the next thing that we need to provide here are some parameters. And our first parameter that we need to provide, let's see, we had location was one of them, right? And the value for that location, we're just going to pass in the location that we're passing in, right? Easy peasy.
Woohoo!
That one's easy. Okay, and then the other thing was, oh, what did we call it? Artifacts location and artifacts location SAS token. That's right. So our value, and our value is going to be here. Artifacts location, and we'll do the same thing for the SAS token. Get my cursor in the right spot. And pass that parameter. See if we're now at this point we're just passing parameters through that we have already got in here.
Nice. Which actually I think showcases the ease of which to do this like programmatically. Like you can always copy paste code, but if you need to adjust or edit things, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep, exactly. So all right, so we've got this listed now that we're gonna go ahead and deploy now as part of this deployment, our DSC extension that then is dependent upon our VM deployment, which is this one. We need to make sure our parameters are set up. DJ Shan, okay, let's check our Azure subscription real quick. Let's just make sure we're in VNet deploy. We have DJ Shan VM1, okay.
And we also should have a VNet in there, right?
Yeah, it's if that's in there, it's the VNet's in there for sure. Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm targeting the right one. Okay, so DJ Shan, oh, VMKV1, wait a second.
Yeah, so we should double check on that because I think that was the key vault.
Yes, it was. KV, we have KV. Let's just change it to target that one. Our key vault resource group, which is there. Key vault name, info rocks, yep. VNet, that's what we're deploying to. Same pip, that's probably not the one. East US is the location we're passing, and this is our VM side, right? So we're just adding on to this one that we've already built, but now we're going to go ahead and push the extension to it. Another thing that we want to check, so here's a problem with DSC. If you get into this and your extension ends up failing, is you need to go look at that extension and remove it before you reinstall it with the
yeah, and that's something I had to learn with Matt the hard way. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't redeploy something, and so I called my trusty Matt Canty, and the first thing we looked at was the extension, and I had told it was in a failed state. And for some reason, like I'd read all the documentation, but for some reason the obvious was just like I thought I screwed something up even more than where I was. And Matt's like, nope, sometimes the easiest things to do are just to go where you need to go, where you would logically go to just at the start.
Yep. So we don't have any extensions on here, which is good. So we're going to go ahead and deploy this extension, and we'll see a failure. Right? Remember I said I sabotaged this on purpose just so that I could show you a weird kind of error message that you're going to see, which is not very, it doesn't make a lot of sense if you've never seen it before and haven't been explained what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Going to pop up and say, okay, log you in. Yep, that's me. All right. You logged in and you can close this browser tab. Why couldn't you close it for me? All right. So, yep. So this is my subscription. That's what I want. Okay. Now, we're going to do / Azure. Nope. Yep. Deploy Azure Resource Group. And then remember we have, what was it called? VNet Deploy?
Yeah, VNet Deploy is the name. Yep.
Okay. And then upload artifacts, because we have new artifacts to upload. Storage account name. Do you remember what that is?
I don't. We may have to flip back to Azure to find it.
Let's find it. I bet you I could tell if I see it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I will blur these. But at Microsoft, we get access to a lot of different subscriptions. There's a lot of read-only things that we get access to because it's hard to showcase all of the things to customers. So.
VM, same VNet, this one.
Yep.
All right, so we'll take that. And we're going to storage container name. I think it was that standard staging. I think it's just staging. Staging, yep. Template file, Azure Deploy, .json, template parameter file, artifact staging directory is the current directory, DSC source folder is DSC, not validate only, let's do verbose. Let me make sure there's nothing I'm missing. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do verbose so that we get some messages back. You ready?
I'm ready.
Boom. So it's going to go through and do some things and say, upload the files, look and say, oh yeah, this machine's already here, and it's going to try to do the, okay, that's not the error message I was expecting. Invalid content, like unable to download from.
So maybe just go to that storage account and make sure it's got public access potentially?
Nope. Look, it's looking for.
Oh, so is that the thing that you had screwed up?
Nope, that's not what I screwed up on purpose. I screwed up, obviously, but not on purpose. So it's going to staging, and DSC extension.json is what it's saying. Notice it. It's just a misspelling. I have DSC extensions, and this is called DSC extension.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward to fix.
Yeah, that's an easy fix. And I did that in a variable, right?
I think so.
Boom. Yeah. Control S, up arrow, enter. All right, 2 things I screwed up.
That's good. That's good. Keep on your toes. It shows that we also aren't perfect. Uh-oh, now what?
The resource. Okay, this is the one I was expecting. Okay.
Yeah. An incorrect segment length.
Incorrect segment length.
So explain that, because you've explained it to me before, and I think you did a pretty good job. I feel like if folks get this, they may want to know exactly what it means.
So here's the case with this desired state configuration extension that we're using, with any extension that you're using, that resource is actually a child resource of the parent resource. So where you might tend to not look or think about things, like especially when you're doing nested templates, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is just a template, and it's it's going to be deployed by itself, although that resource inside that template is a child template, so you don't realize this. So if you go into your DSC extension file and you look at the name of the extension that we called it, this name actually has to include the parent name.
Okay.
So instead of being called just DSC extension, it's got to be called VM/extension. So in here, we have to do something then where we say concatenate. I forgot my little squares. So we're going to concatenate, and we'll put a comma in here, and we'll put that in quotes. And what else are we going to concatenate that with?
The parent, right?
Mm-hmm. So we're going to pull that in from the parent is the VM, right? So we'll just pass in the VM name here. So we got to make a parameter for that, right? And so we don't have a parameter for that right now. So we got to go back up here and we got to say VM name. It's a string, and we're going to call this name of the VM that we are extension.
That works.
Yeah. So now that we've added another parameter into this file,
you gotta add it.
Have to add the parameter when we call the file, right? Yep. So go into here and look for where we are defining our web server eyes, and then we'll just go down here and say VM name is going to be something that we already have in our parameters again. VM same VM name, that's it. Boom. And so that should fix our problem because the segment links in the name are separated by slashes. And now we will see if we did this right in that. I'm not sure if I need to concatenate an extension in here or not.
Yeah, we could try it. If we do, then we know that's another spot to go. I can't remember. And
I think I need, I'm just going to throw it in there, and if it breaks, it breaks. Because I think that we're just putting the VM name in there, and that VM name doesn't contain the slash that we need. So
oh, yeah, that's true. Okay, so then add it in.
Okay, so now we're good. Control S and save all of this business. And then let's go ahead and up arrow it again. Let's double check and make sure that I don't think it tried to deploy the extension because it saw that and said, no, we were all screwed up. But let's just go check. Deploy. And this is the one we're targeting. And we're going to say, where are you? Extensions and applications. And nope, no extension is there yet. So now we can just hit ready, set, go. Boom. It's going to go through, re-upload everything because we made changes. It's going to re-upload all of our files. Template is valid. That's a good sign.
See, and I feel like what we could hit home on here is, while it might feel frustrating at times to code all this up, if you can code it and you can actually have environments come up fast with everything being fully configured, it's worth it to go through everything. Because once you get everything a little more streamlined, I think then you can start focusing on other things then. You know, you're not having to do all the manual configurations.
Right. And this is, okay, so something broke. Cannot modify extensions in the VM when the VM is not running. So that VM is deployed, but it's powered.
Oh, it's another good one.
Yes. Yeah. So one thing I will say about that, what you were talking about with having, taking the time to code this, is you're not going to do this if you're just deploying one VM one time, right?
Correct. Right. And often when I showcase things to folks, I'm building it in the GUI because it's going to be a one-off. It's not going to be something I'm needing to have sophisticated in the realm of infrastructure as code. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, but one of the things that I like to do also is when I'm writing a template and I'm thinking about the workload that I'm writing this template for, I tend to think in a bigger scale, right? I tend to think, well, how can I genericize this template so that it will work for, say, another deployment that I want to do, right? So what my goal or my vision would be to have, okay, I have a VM template, and this is a standard template for my entire organization. These are the things that we have to have done, right? Any security things that are standard to the organization, blah, blah, blah. And then that will be the VM template that I call in all of my nested templates, right? So I might have 20 main templates that call the same VM template. So genericize that VM template enough. And I do have an example, and maybe I'll try to standardize that example so that I can show kind of all the cool things that you can do with a template, for a VM, because you can do things like make that template generic enough that you can pass in a set of disk sizes, and that will create disks of that size on that VM, right? So now you're talking about being able to pass in 2 disks or 4 disks, or and now you're, what you're configuring, you have all those standards set in that one template, and now you can say, oh, this workload only needs 2 disks, or this doesn't need any, or things like that, right? So now you can in your parameter, you can say, do I want to deploy this, yes or no? And you can put those conditions in your resource deployments and say, if condition deploy this is true, then do this, otherwise it won't do that, right? So now it really genericizing things and reusing the templates that you've already created become really, really very helpful.
Yeah.
All right, you think that machine's had enough time to start?
I think so. It's worth trying.
All right. And we're re-uploading our files again, just because that's what PowerShell does. Template's valid. It's going to go through, and notice how it says the VM deployment is running. The VM deployment is succeeded because it sees that the VM is already there. This is not like Terraform, or as I like to call it, Terraform, because I've had so many problems with it, in that the state that it sees is not stored in a state file. The state that the ARM template execution engine sees is the state that it is in Azure. But
I think I was gonna say, I think like folks who have coded a lot with Terraform, they didn't start with ARM templates. So to them it makes sense, right?
And it makes sense as well, as because I can't write an ARM template to deploy to a competitor's cloud, right? If we have customers that are multi-cloud hybrid, and they are running in our competitors as well, they're not going to deploy an ARM template to those. So Terraform is kind of what fills that gap. And it does have some really good constructs, and it does have looping, and it does have all that fun stuff that we have in ARM. It's just multi-cloud capability. That's the selling point. Oh, look, our VM extension
is running.
Provisioning. So if we go and take a look at that, let's come in here and look at.
It's up a bit. There you go.
Oh, it's transitioning. So maybe we want to log into this thing. I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to open RDP session. I am going to paste that in there, connect to it, and I think, you know what, we're going to, nope, that's not the one. Use a different account. I think this was the standard. I'll try one time and then I'll go check it.
It worked.
Oh, that is like my.
You haven't completely lost it, Matt.
Well, that's debatable. My wife would argue.
And she's a real boss.
She is. So a couple things that I will kind of showcase about this desired state config extension. First of all, remember I said password's going to expire. I'm not going to remember it anymore. It rebooted me.
So it must have installed the server role.
It did. It did.
Okay, so we'll give it a couple seconds here, and you should be able to RDP back into it.
Yeah,
and I think showing where some of these spots to go in terms of troubleshooting would be helpful.
Yes, I will show that. I also did want to show that Windows feature thing, which is how we're going to verify that it's on there, anyways. Of how you can.
Oh no, it's on there. MC admin, right?
Oh yeah, it is. Wow.
Well, hang on, it doesn't have a password though. You have your password in.
Yeah, I know. It didn't prompt me for it.
Oh.
I'm thinking maybe it remembers.
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, now I have to remember that.
There you go.
All right, and it's going to pull open over there again. Gotta love it. Okay. Come on, full screen. There we go. All right, so let's pop open PowerShell. I hate that.
It's real tiny. I don't know if you can.
It is real tiny for me too. So I always do this. I always go here and then bump it up to like 2024. That's still kind of tiny. It might not be for you, but I'm old, so.
Folks, this is what happens. This is what happens when you get in your 40s. There you go.
How's that?
That works.
All right, so if you do this, get Windows features. This is how we're going to verify that Iis was installed. So you'll see this list of feature capabilities that Windows has, and you'll see not all of them are installed.
Yep.
So all of these you would be able to do that same thing that we did where we said ensure present and then list the name. And this is actually the name that you want. It's this name over here. So this just kind of shows you the friendly view of, oh yeah, what's installed. And we actually want to look for web server. It's not installed. So web server Iis not installed. It is available to install. So let's take a look and see why that didn't install. So here we go. Let's go do some troubleshooting. And if we go to C, Windows Azure, and we go to, I believe it's logs, plugins, PowerShell DSC, and then here is our, where that plugin kind of, does the error logs. And I like to reverse sort by date modified and then go for a bigger size document because that likely, we're not going to do that right now.
It's because you had it off.
It's because I was saving money. My boss thanks me. Okay, so downloading configuration package. So you can see here where it downloaded from our storage account /staging/DSC and then webserver.zip, and then looking for the definition of the configuration function, right? So it extracted it, but it pulled out that .ps1 file, and it actually did find it. It's creating the moff files, executing the function.
But there's a warning.
And it did not.
So you've got to first import the module.
Oh, but wait, hold on. That was just a warning, so it wasn't necessarily an error.
Okay. Well, yeah, it said that it didn't find a moff file.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, open up go to the end of the log file. You're still at the beginning. So it said no metamoth backup file exists to restore DS.
Oh, that's just that's just one of the log things.
Okay.
It has not. It doesn't.
Okay. So I thought that maybe was helpful. Maybe not. So there's other spots to go though.
Yeah, I'm wondering though if it did not just was working after, because we logged in pretty quickly after we restarted it, right?
Okay. So then run it again.
Oh, then we wait for that whole thing to scroll. Aha,
It is there. And if you go back to Server Manager, I think if you refresh, you'll probably see it there too. Because I think it didn't show up there initially. But if you refresh it, it should show up. Yep. Look at that.
There it is. We have it.
We just logged in before the configuration had completed.
Okay. Yeah. So this is one thing. Okay. So this is where you would look. We were looking to troubleshoot something that we didn't need to troubleshoot. We're just jumped the gun because we're impatient. We're old. our lives are slowly ticking away. We don't want to waste any more of it waiting for Windows. Yeah. It seems like it's wasting away more quickly now. But we can also go to Event Viewer. Let's do that. Go to Event Viewer, and if you take a look at the application and services logs, I think it's there, Microsoft, there will be one buried down in here and it's not Azure, it's actually just desired state configuration right here, right? So we have logs, and if you start running into too much trouble, you can actually enable the debug logs.
Okay.
If I remember how to do that off the top of my head, I don't remember how to do it. I thought there was like a task or something that you could do, but there's a way that you can enable the debug logs. But here's a couple of your other logs that you can look at, in the event that you're having problems. So go to desired state config, in the event viewer, go into this folder structure here. Remember, it's just the Windows Azure logs, plugins, whatever the plugin is, and then the version. Another cool place that I'll show you that's probably not necessarily for you to use to troubleshoot, but it might be something that's fun to look at, is if you go into packages, plugins, and that extension, you will notice that there is a DSC work folder in here, and this is the configuration for that. And here is the file that it unloaded. This is just the configuration. Let's just open it. Right, that's just the configuration, and it took that and it created a MOF document out of it. And here's the MOF document. And if you just open it with Notepad, you'll see, it is kind of human readable, but there are some things like if you were to pass your passwords in, right? And there's some sort of syntax here. You can see, some of these double colon things, but it is human readable. If you had passwords, those passwords would be in here. However, if you pass them in through protected settings, they would actually be encrypted. Yeah, so here's that actual MOF document that was generated through our web server config.
Very cool. Very cool. So I think that kind of gets folks primed for DSC. Like I said, I will highlight some of that in the show notes. I might even split this up into 2 sessions, only because there's a lot of good content, and I want to make sure we get all of it on there. And you know how people are. It's hard for everybody to pay attention. We're all virtual still. One of these days we'll be back in person, right? One of these days.
Exactly. I thought you were going to say only because Matt's long-winded.
No, well, we both are. But it's with good reason. We're trying to get folks excited about using this extension because of the fact that it can help you speed up your configuration process quite a bit.
And we like to explain things in a way that somebody has little to no experience with that can understand. So
yeah, exactly. Well, Matt, I do appreciate you taking the time again today to walk us through this, because I do feel like the way in which you explain some of this makes so much sense, so much more sense, I should say, than it would if you're reading a document, right? Or any documentation on DSC, because it's one of those things where people learn so many different ways. I feel like giving them some of the high-level overview, some of the things to watch out for, pay attention to, all of that matters, and hopefully it speeds up the process, right?
Yes. And you'll find probably examples of other desired state configuration out there. I know in your repo, didn't you have some desired state configuration for?
I did. In fact, maybe what we could do for one of these sessions before we're done and we delve into Bicep, we could even highlight some of the work that you helped me build with those desired state configurations and configuring replica domain controllers, just because of the fact that I think that's an interesting conversation point, right? We were able to do quite a bit, and you even showed me ways in which to sort of truncate my code so I didn't have duplicative pieces of code in there. And it was a cool reality, kind of realizing some of it. So maybe that's something we can do kind of to round out some of the ARM template. And I think, so we may have 1 or 2 more sessions on ARM templates, but we're going to then pivot and talk about Bicep templates, because Bicep is the new fancy language, which is just, it's an easier way to understand ARM template language, I would think. Wouldn't that be a good way of describing it, Matt?
It is, especially for like hardcore devs too. It's easier for them because some of the constructs like looping and things like that is more dev oriented, right? It's more what they're used to in imperative coding. So you can imperative code in Bicep, and all that it really does is generates ARM declarative code in the background that you can then, that will then deploy for you. So but there's a lot of other cool things with Bicep. So we'll definitely get into some of that.
Yeah, and so I think maybe what we'll do, Matt, is we'll talk about the ARM template components that you helped me build for the replica domain controllers. It'll be a little bit more of the DSC. We'll just highlight code. We'll maybe even kick it off and make sure that it runs. And then from there, we'll dig into Bicep. So if you have been hanging out, paying attention the entire time we've gone through this, thank you. Definitely like, subscribe, share, drop Matt a line, drop me a line. I know how to get a hold of Matt if you're more on Twitter, for instance. So Matt is not on Twitter. He's on LinkedIn though. But yeah, so stay tuned. We've got probably a handful more sessions to kind of go through before we round out this whole series. And I hope you've been learning quite a bit of how you can teach an infrastructure person how to code. Turns out it's not as crazy as we probably all thought it was, right?
Infrastructure people aren't crazy.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate you taking the time. And with that, I will stop the recording and we'll work on some of the next couple of sessions here. Thanks, everyone. Bye.